On Tuesday, I finished reading The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, and I have to say that, as of right now, it is my favorite book of all time. The story, writing, characters, and themes were all so well written and beautifully unfolded that on the very last page, I cried. It's been a long time since a book has made me cry, so I cannot urge enough to anyone who is watching this video, please read this book. It is truly an incredible work of art. But this isn't a book review about The Count of Monte Cristo. I wanted to discuss my passion for reading and how it's changed and continues to change my life. I've always loved reading since I was a kid, partly because I was bullied. So, books are my best friend that I could turn to forget my own life and enter a world and story of someone else's. If that sounds like fiction, then you're correct. I read exclusively fiction growing up, from Harry Potter to The Giver, from Kane Chronicles to Percy Jackson, from Diary of a Wimpy Kid to Elephant Run. I could go on and on about all the stories I read and loved. I won't bore you with that, but my point is I read a ton. As I got into high school, though, my priorities started to really shift, some for the better, some for worse. In terms of what was worse, I got into League of Legends, and that began to consume most of my free time. I always loved video games like Pokemon and COD 4, but League of Legends was my first taste of competitive video games. And considering I had given up on becoming a soccer player during my freshman year of high school, this seems like the next outlet for me to channel my competitive spirit into. And while I was still a good reader, I wasn't taking as much time to focus on reading. I was just doing what was required of me for school, such as books we had to read for class and summer reading. And it's not like I didn't enjoy it. I read World War Z one summer for summer reading, and when we had our book discussion about it, I had a really good conversation with the teacher who hosted the book discussion for that book. But otherwise, I had stopped being curious to find good books and really enjoy them. As I got into university, I was still doing reading for my classes, but at this point, I was taking League of Legends very seriously. And especially once lockdown for COVID hit, I don't even think I read any books during that time. So at this point, it seemed that all I was focusing on, besides getting my classwork done so I wouldn't fail, was solo queue. And fast forward to graduation, I was no longer aspiring to become a League of Legends player. And so at first it seemed like I had wasted a lot of time on something that didn't work out, which actually was not true. But I did eventually recognize the trade off in terms of time that I'd spent on this competitive video game rather than other things that should have also been important to me, which led me to get back into reading. And so after my first year I graduated, I resolved to read 5 books. Now, that might sound like too few to some people and too much for others, but I felt I had set an appropriate goal for me to get back into the swing of reading, and I successfully hit that goal. Now, I was able to hit that goal because that year I was reading a lot of books on investing. I was really interested about learning how to invest. I was really passionate about learning about money because I wanted to take the money I was earning from my job and start putting it to work. But then in 2025, I wanted to pivot because I had read so much about investing. I wanted to pivot to self help books that would make me become more competent and capable in different areas. And this actually killed my motivation to read. The number of books I read last year went down to only two. And I couldn't understand why, even though I loved reading and was really good at it. I just couldn't bring myself to read books, even ones that on the surface sounded like they were going to help me become, more competent, more capable. I eventually realized that it was because I wasn't inspired to read the books I was reading. I didn't have a desire to read them, even if they were going to help me learn something that would make me a better person, so to speak. Now, some people might argue that, reading requires discipline, it's not motivation. But as someone who loves to read, this is one of the few hobbies where I will advocate against making it a discipline. It's good to make it a habit if we can. And there's a difference between those two. But the thing to recognize is that our brains are mental factories, and reading is fantastic, if not the best way, to put ideas into our mental factories. My issue with reading last year was that I was focused on using reading as a discipline to build myself up rather than a habit to enjoy. In other words, I was so focused on the outcome of reading certain books and getting through them rather than the process of reading something that I wanted to read. And that is what killed my motivation to read last year. And I ended up just falling back into video games. So whenever I go into reading for the sake of reading, I find that I can't actually get myself to do it because it becomes a chore. But when I read because I found a book that I want to read, regardless of its topic, whether it's history, self-help, or fiction, that gives me a huge gust of wind, a huge tailwind rather, to sink time into a book. A lot of time. And if I'm really enjoying what I read, I can get engrossed for hours and read hundreds of pages easily, no problem. Now, I know not everyone grew up as a reader, and some may think books are boring or a waste of time, but I guarantee that there's a part of you that loves to read. You just need to figure out what you enjoy. And it's not necessarily genre specific. I find that I enjoy reading what catches my attention. Now, fiction easily captures my attention, and after going years of not reading any fiction whatsoever, The Count of Monte Cristo was such a breath of fresh air. Oh my God. No longer was I just reading a book on investing or being a better leader or making better decisions. I was once again captivated by a story, its setting, themes, and characters. But that might not be. No longer was I just reading a book on investing or being a better leader or making better decisions. I was captivated by a story, its setting, themes, and characters. But that may not be the case for you, and that's okay. Maybe you find that the books that captivate you are when you learn about how something works, or a time period of history, or a discussion on a certain topic. And any one of these is valid to get started with or find enjoyable. My litmus test for finding a book that interests me is asking myself, what do I want to read? It's a really simple question, and sometimes the answer can seem to elude me and probably eludes other people as well, right? If I can't figure out what I want to read, I just pick something up that catches my attention or a book I've heard good things about. I'll literally just walk into a bookstore, take a look around, and if I pass by something that catches my attention, whether because it's the name, the title of the book, or the cover art of it, I'll take a careful look at it, read the summary, and decide whether or not I want to start reading it. If that doesn't sound helpful in choosing something, then I recommend to keep it even simpler. Just trust your gut. if you see a book and you stop for a moment to look at it, your gut's probably telling you something. And while I can't say what it is, you should definitely pick up that book and start reading it. And if you don't believe me that this trick works, I want to emphasize that since the start of this year, I have already read 6 books. I wanted to make up for last year's deficit by setting a goal of 10. And in order to accomplish this, the trick is literally picking something that I have wanted to read. And what's even better is that once you read one book that you enjoy, you'll have more inspiration to read more books. So, for example, after finishing Monte Cristo, there's like 5 more books I'm interested in reading in, whether it has to do with the father of the author or another book that was written by the author, or other books by different authors that have tackled similar themes or have the same kind of storytelling. So the most important thing to do is start. Now, if you've had the attention span to continue watching to this point, which if you have, thank you very much, I really appreciate it. You're probably thinking to yourself, hey, the title of this video is about how reading will change my life, and you haven't explained that yet, bozo. Get to it. And okay, you're right. Here's the simplest way I can put it, all right? Reading sets you free. Reading sets you free because it opens your mind up to the world and beyond. Different people, perspectives, ideas, themes, settings. By picking up a book, you can go anywhere, real or not real. There are no limits in books. And so the freedom reading a book gives you is priceless. And while starting reading, whether it's your first time or you're trying to get back into it after a long break, is hard, it becomes way easier after you do. It's basically a snowball. It continues to roll. So start with something that you want to read, whether it catches your attention or you think it's easy or a recommendation from a person. Just start and go from there. You can become free by reading books. And if there's one thing I wish for every person to be able to achieve in this world, it is freedom. That, in a sense, is the root of self-actualization. So let me know if you enjoyed this video, and maybe in the future I'll cover some books I enjoyed or found helpful. If you found this video helpful, drop a like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. So have a great weekend otherwise, and until next time, peace.